Alright, welcome to another video. We are back on the lathe. Right here I have a maple piece coming from a tree I cut today. Today is July 10th. I started spinning this one, experiment number 1, this maple piece right here. We're going to call it the chalice. I'm going to take it off. I'm going to put this in a brown paper bag for 3 months. We're going to come back at 3 months and see what that looks like. Experiment number 1. Chalice is going in the brown paper bag. July 10th. Wow, October. Experiment number 2. This is a white oak piece. Most white oaks that I use don't split. They're pretty strong, it's a hardy wood, and I've also had it in the backyard for 3 years. It's been drying for quite some time. I cut it up and I soaked it in dish soap. This was actually in there a few days, I'd say about 5 days. It smells great though. And we're going to spin this. We're just going to make a dowel out of it, a nice long one, and save it for a future project. Not sure what I want out of it yet. We're going to see if that splits. See what happens. White oak. Smells like Dawn soap. We're going to let that sit on the shelf. Alright, next experiment. We got this chunk of maple, which I cut down last week. I then soaked it in dish soap for 3 days. I'm going to turn it, and we're going to let that dry, see what happens. So we've added a few things. To the shop, like this new mask that just came in, so I don't have to go through all those old ones. As you can see over here, I have a tube running in, and a wire. That's going to the vacuum outside. We also got our new 3 3/4 chuck, which I'm going to have a lot of fun with. That way it's always centered. And we tape everything when we experiment it, so I always have tape now. For this maple piece, I carved it about 80% of the way. We're going to do a rough carving. This is soaked in dish soap, so we are going to see how that sits for 3 months, what cracks, what doesn't. So we have this green piece of maple here that I cut down last week, and I just turned it. For this experiment, I turned it 80%. Now I'm going to throw it in the microwave for, I say, 30 seconds. Welcome back to 4 months later. We have a ton of bowls here today and a ton of projects that I learned in the time being here. I have some that came out really nice, really shiny, polished and everything. I have some with holes in them, and I have some that split from our experiments. So let's dive into it. So first up, I'm going to go over the ones that I had in the experiment in the video prior to this. So on July 10th, I made this chalice piece. This one stayed in the brown paper bag. This has mold in it, all through the top, all through the side. It really needs to breathe, and the brown paper bag isn't allowing that oxygen. It did crack a tiny bit going to the pith, but again, it's wide enough where it didn't crack all the way through. This is a cool piece, but that mold is an issue. If I can't scrape it off, we'll see what happens. This is the oak piece that I turned with no pith. It was soaked. Dawn? No, it kind of smells like wood now. It did not split, held its form. I could turn it more if I wanted to. It's looking great. This is that maple chunk that I turned, and I soaked in soap. This one had the pith in it, but it actually didn't crack all the way through. There's a hairline crack here, and there's a slight crack on the inside running towards it, but because it's so dense, it hasn't cracked through yet. So I'm wondering if I put it back on, I might be able to shave it down and make it into a bowl. And then that last maple bowl that I was making in the microwave turned out to look beautiful, absolutely amazing grains. The problem is I shaved too thin on the side, and now there's a crack going through the outside, revealing a huge hole, and even the beeswax couldn't cover up that. Again, don't go too far on your sides. Some other things I learned, even when you're turning a dowel like this, you can still crack it. This, I believe, was a cherry piece, and I spun it, and there's the biggest, this was green when I spun it, and right to the pith. That's a huge crack that I should not turn anymore. This was a cedar piece that I had, and there was a rotten chunk in the middle. I figured if I spun it, that chunk would come flying out, but the rest would hold together. Cedar is such a light wood that as soon as I reached that rotten area, the whole thing shattered in 2 pieces, and that was a dangerous scene. Here's a maple piece I have. This has the pith in it. It also has a knot right here, a huge hole that you can go into. This came out really smooth because I smoothed it down with beeswax. This hole was dangerous because if you get the chisel in there, it gets stuck and could rip it out of your hands. Also, this indent here was very big. I like the coloring and I like the beeswax finish on it, but again, it's nothing that, it was really a learning project. Here's an awesome maple piece that I turned last week. I coated with 2 layers of beeswax, and I was able to finish the entire inside, making it nice and smooth. And then this one I was working on, I'm making the bottom without a hole. So I extended the chunk out, and then I chiseled away at it while I was on the lathe. The problem was it wasn't exactly flush, so I put sandpaper on the lathe and tried to smooth it out, but then I wasn't able to put beeswax on, so I'm in that predicament right now of learning that process. It's not exactly flat, you can see this circle there, but it is nice because the rest of it is very strong. Here's an oak piece that I turned. This oak has 2 layers of beeswax on it. The problem was I spun too far in where the chucks were, and it made a perfect hole right where the chucks were, which I think could be used as a platform piece. It's still very hard. Oak is such a strong wood, but it was definitely something I'm going to keep. Here's a piece I put in on June 27th. This is a beech piece, not turned at all. I just put it in to see if it would get moldy on its own, and I don't see any surface mold. The bark's starting to come off. That's separated, but besides that, nothing crazy. Here's another beech piece I kept in brown paper bag since June 27th, and this one also doesn't have any surface mold on it. So I guess it's really only once you turn it, when it's exposed and when it releases. No mold on it. I'm now playing a lot with cedar. Cedar is a very light wood, and I love the red. It gives it a special shine, gives me something to look at. I'm also implementing tried and true food finish for the bowls, and that gives it a more plastic feel. It's not my favorite because of the stickiness. It kind of gives a drag on the product, but no complaints. I've learned not to deal with holes or knots like that because your chisel will get caught, pieces will go flying, things can get broken. Any pieces with cracks in them are not worth turning because you'll get far enough where the whole thing will just shatter, and that's happened a few times for me. For sharpening tools, this set came with all the chisels I needed. I bought my own, so the ones that it came with, I could sharpen however I wanted. I started making tools with my grinder to the degree that I wanted, a certain sharpness for me and precision. And that's the great thing about this. It's your design, it's your product. Do what you want with it. So I started making tools the way I wanted them, and I was able to make a super sharp point, easier for me to grind away at some of these products. So I think that's it for our lathe experiments. Right now that's the majority of the bowls I have. Some of them I was able to sell. My favorite design is where it V's in and then it comes out wide. I like that way that looks. With the chucks, make sure that it can grip it, you're not too far out and you're deep enough. Don't go too deep where you put a hole in it. And a lot of my bowls that are drying on the steps over there, they do turn into an oval. So there's a in-between period, in between 4 months, where you're able to turn it and still circle, and you can still get that grip before it turns oval, and that's really when I've gotten the best bowls. I'm going to keep making some because it's such a fun hobby for me. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.